You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur. Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz. And I know that we're obviously still going through quite a bit of stress. So I put together a list of top 10 tips for dealing with stress, taken from my interviews with icons of the weddings and event industry. And to get a copy, go to theweddingbiz.com/top tips. Again, theweddingbiz.com/top tips. So if you missed last week's episode, it was with the wonderful photographer out of Oregon who travels worldwide named Eric McVeigh. It was a really, really great interview. If you missed it, be sure to check that out. And this week, my special guest is Ira Levy, the creative director of Levy New York City Design and Production, an award-winning full-service design and production company focused on lighting, sound, and video for events, architecture, and what he calls architainment. He is also the lighting designer for such event industry luminaries as Preston Bailey and Colin Cowie, amongst others. Past clients include Martha Stewart Weddings, Dolce Gabbana, and the American Museum of Natural History. So enjoy my conversation with Ira Levy. Hey, Ira, great to have you on the podcast. It's been a bit. I'm glad to have you now.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I think we saw each other at that one of the last conferences that was pre-pandemic. So it's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, when we could actually talk with no masks and be in the same area together. God, what a difference. It's still so surreal to me, but anyway. But, you know, when I was reading up on you, I don't know if I heard it somewhere or read it somewhere, that you were majoring in pre-med, saw a Pretenders concert, which captivated you so much, you then joined the college concert committee, graduated, and then went into entertainment. And it's funny, I can't think of a bigger contrast, you know, than between pre-med and lighting design.
Yeah, I thought I'd be a good Jewish doctor, you know, like my mom wanted. And then
right.
I always was into music when I was in high school. And then I went to see the Pretenders in the school gym, and I was blown away. The whole thing was produced by students. So I joined the concert committee basically the next day, and pretty much my college career became like concerts and activities first. That was my major. And then school almost was extracurricular. I did whatever I could to pass.
So what were some of the other concerts then? I mean, did you start really going to concerts more and really paying attention, like especially the big national, well, Pretenders were a national act, but like at a bigger venue?
We happened to be a school that was known for really good production through the years before I got there. And so a lot of bands, when they would go for a national tour, they would do a sort of warm-up dates there. So I worked with U2 when I was like 18 years old, was when the War album, Sunday Bloody Sunday, came out.
Jeez,
and
wow.
Joan Jett and Peter Gabriel. So it was right at the time when the first Moving Lights came out. So it was really interesting to see all of that going on. It was the Very Lights, which started with like Genesis, and then Peter Gabriel had it.
Ira, I saw the Genesis concert, that one with the light. It blew. It was like 1984, 5, 6. That time period blew me away.
And these lights were like people were guarding them. You know, like they came in and nobody could see them and stuff like that. And then I got involved with nightclubs. I worked as a VJ at a nightclub in the 80s. So it was like right when MTV and Tears for Fears and all those different groups were playing. You know, Frankie Goes to Hollywood in the clubs. And what I was doing was I was syncing the videos to the DJ audio, because at that point the audio on the tapes that we would get wasn't that good. So we would play, the DJ would start playing it, and then I would sync it. So I've always been like kind of tinkering and technical.
Yeah. And
then I worked at Palladium, but I really started to get into the lighting thing like when I started working at a nightclub, and it was like when the whole rave scene started. And I was the manager there, and I started working with a company from Italy that made all the moving lights that moved and changed colors. And this was at the point where this was now coming to the market where people can actually buy these things, because the first moving lights you can only rent. So they were only on big tours. And I got involved with, and I said, you know, these lights are great, but nobody really knows about them. And I started as like the head of marketing, and I became like a liaison to lighting designers. So I worked on Cirque du Soleil Mystère. I worked on a lot of the Las Vegas shows and the beginning of the, like when the Chicago Bulls and the teams used to come out at the beginning of the game, the pregame shows.
Right.
So that was that. And then, we were just last week when we were talking and you mentioned Leroy Bennett and I worked with him. So I was like sort of like sales and engineering, but with a creative side to it. So I was able to relate to designers because usually a lot of designers are very standoffish because they feel like they're talking to like some sales guy and he's just trying to sell them the lights for their tour. So I became very close with a lot of different designers and spent time with Roy. We traveled to Venice, I think, together to the factory in Italy. And I started producing rave shows.
That's wild.
So I did the biggest raves in New York at the time, and we would go into venues and we tell them we're doing a documentary on American dance culture. And it was in the late 80s in New York when they were trying to get film and TV going in New York. So they had a rule that if you can use a public venue as long as you pay the expenses. So we did a big rave at the New York Coliseum, which was in Columbus Circle at the time, which is now where the Time Warner AOL tower is. We had like Moby and all these large DJs, Daft Punk played, all these different DJs. And then we used to also do the Armory on 26th and Lex, which was where MTV and VH1 started doing their fashion awards. So it was interesting because I felt like my career came full circle because a couple of years ago I did a book launch for Preston at the Armory.
Oh,
and
great.
I walked into this place I hadn't been to like 20 years and brought back a lot of memories. So it was exciting.
Well, that's great. And Preston, I believe, wasn't he one of the first real big ones that helped your career in the event industry to take off?
100% for like in the wedding, I never thought about working in that industry. I started in fashion and sports and stuff like that. And then I did one of these like wedding showcase things and I met Preston and I had my book with me and I started showing him the pictures and he said, I never saw anything like this. I'd like to meet up, blah, blah, blah. We met up and then I did this effect of projecting like a real natural water. And this is like before video and everything was really a part of lighting. So it's like, I have this event. I want pink water everywhere. So that was my break-in with him. And then we have a very similar chemistry. So we got along very well.
Well, what is I know this is a big question, but I mean, just philosophically speaking, what is your overall philosophy concerning like design? How do you look at it overall?
When I go into a space, I kind of visualize it from a lighting and I would say intangible point of view at this point because video and projection have become a real major component of what I do. But I visualize what the space would look like illuminated. So, right away, I'm kind of visualizing maybe certain areas that I would like to call attention to or columns. And then at the same time, I'm battling the mystery of light, right? In other words, like light does amazing things and you go to concerts and shows and it does amazing things, but you see all of the structure. So my design style is kind of like to not to be seen, just heard. So like I'm trying to figure out ways not only to make the room look great, but also to blend my equipment in areas where it would not be seen and would not take away from the overall look of the space. It's like an architecturally integrated lighting style.
Well, in one of the blogs that you wrote, which I read, you talk about needing to also monitor the room the entire night to affect the mood, which I know that's what turns it into something experiential, doesn't it?
Sure. I mean, everybody's so focused on the technical side and the cost and the installation and finishing before the people walk in that a lot of people like, okay, my job is done. But like really the job just started, that you to know what time of the night really to change the lighting levels and to do that at a very slow speed or whatnot. It's not just like a guy behind the board who's left to make those decisions is really should be done by a designer or somebody who can feel the room and know, like, okay, people are sitting down to dinner. Let's get into a really soft, sexy kind of environment. And with all the technology that's out there, a lot of people don't see that. They just see like the lights work, they're bright, they do this, they do that. But soft, natural candlelight type of thing, getting the right colors and stuff like that, I think is overlooked and underrated.
So you're really only programming a portion of the night and then leaving room to really be an artist in the moment, right? And to, like you said, read the room, read the people, read the vibe.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's very simple. You're just working the dimmer, the one, it's just one fader that really makes the whole difference in the whole project, where if it's just a little bit too bright, it just takes away from the whole thing. If it's too dark, if people can't see what they're doing, so it's just about really feeling the room and what times, and sometimes you don't have the choice. You're working with a client who's like, no, I want it like this, or I want it bright, or no, we can't do that. And so you are, as a professional, you still have to do what they want. But when you're working with someone who trusts you, you can just really create.
Ira, when I listen to you and when I think about what you do, it seems to me that it's not just kind of supplementing, complementing the mood in the moment, but I mean, I believe you can create the mood. You can almost lead the crowd into a certain kind of an emotion, an emotional period.
Oh, no, for sure. I mean, like I always say, it's not the turning of the screw, it's knowing which screw to turn. So, again, like depending on the type of project you have, whether it's using color or to change the mood of the room, as everybody, we all work with a lot of LED, and there's so many options as far as color is concerned. So you can start a room with a certain very warm vibe, and then progressively kind of cool it down to get like a very sort of after hours kind of feel, or bring up the energy when people start to dance.
So when you're working with an event designer or a planner, how close are you, during the event? I mean, I know it, well, in a minute, I want to talk about beforehand, how you prepare with it. But what about in the moment? Is there a lot of communication between the two of you, or is it more, you're on your own determining?
I think it really varies. I mean, there are events like when I work with Colin Cowie, where there's a lot of things that are choreographed, and different things have to happen at different times, and there's a reveal or there's something like that. Then there's more of a call of a show, and maybe even communication with headsets. And then there are times where it's really, we're just doing a beautiful dinner, and I'm left to kind of make the changes as I feel.
All right. So tell me, in terms of, I would love to hear your process. And if there's involvement between you and the client, or if it's really just you and the event designer, I'm assuming that's most of what the person you're dealing with is the event designer versus a client ahead of time. Is that right?
It would be great if it was that easy. It can be one of three people. It can be the end client, whether it's on a social or a corporate level. It can be the planner, and it can be the designer. So like larger projects may have a planner and a designer. And each person has its own personality. So a lot of times it is the designer, where I'm working with them. We're like, hey, what do you think about this, and whatnot. And then I first listen a lot to understand what the idea is in the room, and then I put my suggestions in if I feel like it's like a designer. Certain designers are like really open to ideas. So like, what do you think about this or that? And I'll send them pictures, and we'll go back and forth and whatnot. The process can be complicated because, believe it or not, we are one of the last companies to get hired on board. So someone will come with a project, and they'll have the decorator and the designer and the planner and whatnot. And then we're discussing ideas, but we don't really we're not contracted yet. So it becomes very hard. You don't want to get too deep into the conversation. And then okay, this project's going to bid and this company came in at this price and so we're going to go with them, so you have to kind of really find your balance as far as like not, a lot of times I just want to come in and throw ideas and stuff like that. And then when I first started doing it, I did that all the time. And then I felt like, hey, what happened to that project? Where'd that person go? What's going on? And then I started to hold back because I said, I'm not going to keep on designing projects, or I would give ideas and then I would have to bid against somebody else on my ideas. And I felt like that really doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you maybe tell me a story, whether it's Preston or Colin or whoever, just kind of be able to describe to me a process, like how they came to you, the kind of things that they talked about and what you did as a solution for it? Is that something you can put in words?
Sure. Yeah. So like in an example with Preston, we did a few large scale projects over at the Waldorf Astoria before they closed. And, I would get the renderings from Preston and he's like, oh, we're going to do these like giant rings with these reflective material hanging down from the rings and whatnot. And so I said, I'm like, it would be really cool is if we put like giant mirror balls in the middle of each one of those rings so that when we hit it with light, the dots would move inside the rings. And so that was a classic example where we just kind of like, yeah, that sounds great. And a couple of weeks before the event, we started trying to find these giant mirror balls and order the equipment and figure out the rigging and all of those different pieces. So I found that like him and Colin are very, very open to ideas and different things, and they want to do stuff that's different and not worried about who did it or who gets credit for it.
And you were going to tell me a specific story?
Yeah. So this was a specific project at the Waldorf where we had to rig these giant things that Preston said only weighed this much. And then it turned out that they weighed like 3 times the amount. And we were working 24 hours and then we had to rig the mirror balls. I would say like that's more of not as much of a story as a situation.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you deal with? Like, what's the hardest part of what you do?
A lot of it is to explain to somebody why they need this service. I remember when I would go to certain meetings with the end client and the planner, and they would say, "Oh, this is so and so. He's going to be handling the lighting," and the father of the bride would say, like, "What do you mean lighting? There's lights right there in the ceiling. Do I have to bring my own light bulbs to this place?"
Yeah.
And so explaining a little bit about the value and, what light does, because people can relate to it in the way like, oh, well, you hired a florist and you're spending all this money on centerpieces. Don't you want them to be illuminated to look good? So you have to take people through a process to explain to them what it is that you're bringing to the table and what that will do and actually enhance their event. And for the most part, most people are like, wow, I'm really so happy that I did that.
Oh, yeah. Geez. I mean, lighting to me has such an enormous impact on the overall feel. I want to be sure you know the wonderful news of our latest show, Stop and Smell the Roses, with acclaimed lifestyle and event design expert Preston Bailey. Not only will he share the secrets, tools, and technologies behind his extraordinary ability to create a theatrical environment out of any space, you will also discover more about the man behind the magic. Preston will reveal how his focus on personal growth has been the root of his professional success, and you'll have the opportunity for him to answer your questions along the way. Plus, Preston will be inviting onto the show many of the star celebrities he has worked with in the past, so you don't want to miss a single episode. We also have another great show on the Wedding Biz Network, The Business of Being Creative, with host Sean Lowe. Since debuting last May, his show has really taken off, and he's continuing to bring you the creative business advice he's shared with accomplished industry notables. Be sure to take advantage of Sean's talkback opportunity by recording questions and comments from right there in each episode's show notes. So if you are a creative who is turning your craft into a business or want to take it to another level, head to theweddingbiznetwork.com and take a listen to Stop and Smell the Roses with Preston Bailey and The Business of Being Creative with Sean Lowe. That's theweddingbiznetwork.com. Now, I know that you did LeBron James' wedding, and obviously that had to have gotten you a lot of publicity. Was there anything special, unique that you were able to do or asked to do for that particular wedding?
Yeah, so I was asked to create pretty much the whole environment. We decided that that was with Preston Bailey. And, Preston is the type of person who says, hey, look, we're working on a budget on this, and it really wouldn't make sense for us to go and build all of this different stuff. I'd rather have your budget be higher, and let's do this with projections. So it was in a tent in San Diego, and then rather than building out a scenery like a lot of projects we worked on together, Preston would build out the scenery of the project. So like if it was supposed to be an Italian garden or something like that, everything is the walls and the windows and everything is built, and then florals are brought in and whatnot. And he said, let's do this with projections. So we basically did a 360-degree seamless projection on all the walls of the tent, so that when people walked in, they felt they were like in a giant ballroom in Versailles. And it was so realistic that like when the light coming in through the windows really felt like sunlight coming in, and then Preston added a few like three-dimensional pieces like mirrors and things like that on the walls. And then we were able to, what's the beauty of that is that you're actually able to take people somewhere else in the same space. So we started with this kind of Versailles thing, and then we brought it to a more outdoor gardeny feel. And then once the music and dancing started, it became more like graphical with nightclub and moving clouds and different things on the wall. So it was, it really was the main focus of the whole project.
Oh, geez, I wish I could have seen that. I know you've also collaborated with various artists for installations like MGM's in Macau and Caesars. And I saw you did this wild billboard for a brand at Times Square in New York City. What is it like doing installations? I imagine that gives you a chance to really take your art to another level.
I find it very exciting because it's a sort of style that we call architainment. So it's a mix between architectural and entertainment lighting. So I'm able to take the dramatic equipment that I use in temporary installations, and now I have to figure out ways to use it in a permanent installation. So like in Macau, I do the casinos at MGM. So I create a specification of light fixtures, and I have to do a lot of research because through the years, a lot of the entertainment lighting doesn't work in a fixed situation because it's got moving lights and motors and things like that, and then if you don't really keep up on the maintenance, the lights go down. So through the years, I started coming up with different ideas and styles. So like I do a lot of the MGM and the H&M stores. A lot of times when they do a flagship, they want to have like a light show or some kind of special piece in there. And I work to find fixtures that are really long life and low maintenance. And you have to fight, on top of that, you have to fight the ambient light that's in the space. You don't have control of that. They want to make sure the place is bright enough for people to walk around and circulate. So I just, through the years, I found it a very exciting area to work in. And that's one area I think I've already been pivoting to because of obviously the amount of events that are going on have diminished greatly. So there's still construction and a lot of real estate transactions going on. So I'm working on some new ideas for lighting sculptures for like lobbies and things like that.
Now, when you're, I also kind of look at this as you're supporting the brand message, for the brand identities. Are you, I assume you're also digging really into what is behind the brand? I mean, how far do you go with that and, what it's all about, what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So, for example, when you're working with an H&M, they have very specific characteristics of their brand and how they want to be represented. So they go as far as even like a behind the scenes situation where they go as far as even finding out what materials the equipment it's made of and the materials that are being used to build the facilities to make sure that there's no PVC and different type of toxic materials. So we would sometimes, I would specify something and I'd have to change it because it didn't meet their brand guidelines.
Mm.
And so that's on the back end. And then on the front end with them, fun is really their sort of thing, you know. So I did a store for them in Las Vegas at the Caesar shop. And it was, you know, the idea was for it to feel like a nightclub. So we put in these giant gold mirror balls and trusses that moved up and down and a moving light system and LEDs that change colors on the walls and things like that. So they specifically usually target a specific theme for a specific location.
What about the role of technology? I mean, I'm just thinking the advancements that you have seen in your lifetime, you know, while you've been doing this are just, it's just over the top. I mean, how do you keep up with it and how do you feel about the role of technology and where it's going?
Sure. So I've always been like married to technology since the beginning. I always, no matter what, I travel a lot to trade shows and to different things in Europe and in the United States, different trade shows. I like to walk down aisles to find like the little unique things. Like I remember when the first color change came out and the color kinetics, I was like, this was amazing, you know, and I was telling everybody about it. And the technology has made things better, but it's also sort of made things a little bit less creative in certain ways because basically, you know, you need to use technology in a tasteful way, right? I mean, it's not like, you know, just
can't just do it for the sake of it. Yeah.
Get a whole bunch of stuff and turn it to 11 and make it go whiz crazy. You know, we call that flash and trash. And so what's happened through the years is that when the technology has become a lot easier to use, like the basic technology. So you see color change LEDs and moving lights everywhere. And so from a competition standpoint of view, it really makes you be on your toes because basically everybody can light a room and put lights, a DJ, this guy or that guy. But, you know, it's about how you use it. If it looks good, if it doesn't look good. But the upper level of technology, like all the technology that has to do with projection and the projection mapping and all that stuff is really, for me, I think is just really unbelievable. It's when I first started working with projection, I used to hate that, you know, someone would come in and say, no, the screen, it has to be, you know, directly across and it can't be at an angle and it can't do that and all these different things. And I'm like, but, you know, we don't want to put a projector there. Yeah. And then so when all of the mapping and image warping came out, it was, for me, it was like just an amazing creative tool. I could just hide a projector in the corner and still make the image look straight or however I want through software. And so that was really amazing. But there's a flip side because it's like there's a lot of Ferraris, but there aren't enough drivers. There's a lot of technical equipment out there, but a lot of people don't know how to use it. So even on a lot of projects, I still kind of keep certain specifications really simple because I don't feel confident that like it's going to be handled properly because, you know, you need like such an infrastructure of technicians and people understanding how this equipment, and it's very fragile, and it's one little thing. If something is not plugged in correctly or a cable's not working right, it can just totally, fail. So you have to really know when to use it and which projects and which clients understand that. A lot of clients want all of that, but they don't understand that like there's a certain learning curve here, or like I did a project for someone who wanted, it was for a brand. They wanted these perfectly cornered LED columns, And this was like before LED walls really were that sophisticated. So we kind of had to cut the tiles and make special frames for them and stuff like that. And I was explaining the whole way, like, this is what it's going to be. This is what it's going to look like and whatnot. And, it was very hard to explain that you guys were really putting a space shot to the moon here. There's going to be some trade-offs. So you have to really know when to use what.
I also want to talk more about how event professionals can work better with someone like you, with a lighting designer. I think it was in a blog you mentioned that you didn't feel that enough event producers budgeted for enough time. And I wonder what you meant about that.
Yeah, I think that time is so important because it's not just the amount of time to get the thing up and working, it's the amount of time to make it look good. So if you're doing a project and you load in the morning and the event is that night, you don't have the time to really sit there and really take the amount of time to focus everything, to create cues, all of these different things. When you make the ambience of a room, you need to kind of sit in there and feel it and change it. And if you've got 100 waiters in there and tables and chairs and flowers and okay, we're ready to focus. Wait, the flowers aren't on the table yet. Take one arrangement and move it to each location. Okay, that's great. Then all of a sudden, all the arrangements come in, and somebody decides they want to move a table, and then so your everything the light is not where it needs to be. So people don't like to spend for an extra day of rental. They want, people want to do it all in one day, and so there's that trade-off of like not being able to make it great. And after putting so much time and effort and money into the project, to me, it doesn't make that much sense.
So if I frame this more so it's really about having enough time for the creative aspect of this, the creative process.
Yeah, again, like in other words, like I think a lot of times you do see people filling rooms with two big trusses of moving lights and just dialing it in because there isn't enough time. Whereas if it could even cost the same amount or less if you were able to take the time to install it, to focus it, to color it, to see what it feels like, to like even something like haze, you usually, you get all the drama by putting the haze in the air, right? So if you don't know how the air conditioning in a room works and you put a hazer in one spot and it's
right.
just pulling all the haze out of the room. And so just by not knowing that, because you had to put the hazer in 15 minutes before people walked in,
right.
It changes everything.
Geez. Is there anything else that you would suggest event industry professionals consider when to work better with a lighting designer? I
think the choreography between the musical talent and the lighting
I would love that.
Is completely overlooked. It's like you're basically at the mercy of, if you happen to have a board op who kind of can get it or can think about things ahead of time, but for the most part, it's lost. You don't know what song is coming up. You don't know what beat. You don't know if the group is doing a dramatic entrance. You don't know any of that stuff. So the idea of groups should be spending more time on coming up with a pre-choreographed lighting system for when they do shows.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that. I mean, obviously I'm biased being in music and entertainment, but also I understand it. And that really can allow us all to take it to a whole nother level. I mean, it just can have so much more impact on the party.
It's really the low-hanging fruit. It's like right there in front of everybody.
Yeah. So before we go, I mean, God, you've done so much in your career. Like, what is left for you to accomplish? What do you look forward to?
Well, I'm going to work more on an personal art side of things. I had a 10,000 square foot warehouse, and I decided, I don't want all of this stuff, and I reduced everything to fit into a 2,000 square foot space. But I kept all the stuff that a lot of stuff I've been holding on to for years that I always wanted to create things with. And I never did anything with it, and so now I'm going to start doing more creative type of sculptures and installations and get more involved with art than just straight events, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's just so important for our own, right, intrinsic.
Yeah, even though you get to have a certain amount of creativity, you are kind of fulfilling a bill of goods for somebody. Whereas if it's art, it's yours. It's you have more passion for it.
Yeah. Well, Ira, I've really enjoyed this. I mean, like I say, for me, lighting is one of my favorite aspects of anything, next to sound. And so I really enjoy talking to you more about this. Thank you.
My pleasure. I would say that the most interesting thing about working in this medium is that it's intangible. That light starts in the ceiling, it ends on the floor, and there's nothing in between. And that part, I think, is the part that makes everybody really enjoy the effects of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Ira Levy. Be sure to check out his website, which is levynyc.net. That's LEVYNYC.net. You could check him out on social media on Instagram and Facebook at LevyNYC. And you can get more information in the show notes at our website of theweddingbiz.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends and colleagues so they can also find it. And don't forget to check out our follow-on segment that comes out every Wednesday called The Next Level, in which I have a guest co-host who with me will tease out some of the highlights of the interview to kind of bring out some advice to help you bring your own business to the next level. And this week's guest co-host is going to be event planner Jennifer Zabinski, who has been on the show before. Also, next week, want to let you know that I'm going to be having the stationer Lisa Zachary, founder and creative director of Papered Wonders. We get into some really great topics. And so we'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.